Hello, this is Professor James Strickler, and this is a course in American government. This lesson is from Unit 7 about the judicial branch. It's Lesson 11 about deciding cases. In this lesson, you'll learn about majority opinions, about opinion assignment, about drafting opinions, about concurring opinions, and about dissenting opinions. In the previous couple lessons, we talked about the process that the Supreme Court goes through in deciding a case. 2 lessons ago, we talked about what they do to accept a case. Last lesson, we talked about the process of arguing a case before them. In this lesson, we'll now talk about how they decide the cases. In a previous lesson, I mentioned that each week, justices meet together for what they call the conference. At that time, it was pointed out that the conference is used to discuss certiorari petitions. Now you're going to learn that it's used for a lot more than that. The conference is also a place where they discuss cases that were just argued before them, a day or 2 before. So they have the oral arguments, they've read all the written arguments, and then they have a chance to go meet together in the conference and talk about those cases. When they talk about them, they also end up voting on who will win or lose the case. Now, they don't literally raise hands, the Chief Justice doesn't say, all right, who's for Mr. Smith, and they raise their hands. Instead, they go around the table and they each take turns talking about the case, with the Chief Justice going first and the Justice with the least seniority going last. As they do this, the Chief Justice keeps notes of what the people say about the case, of who they think should be winning and why and that sort of thing. And then at the end, the Justice will look at his notes and say, okay, based on my count here, I think there are 6 votes for Mr. Smith and 3 votes for Mr. Jones, or whatever it is. And in that way, they vote on who will be the winner or loser of the case. At the conference, they also assign someone to write an opinion. In other words, an explanation for the world of why whoever won. They want to let the world know not just who the victor was, but the reasons for that victory. Now that then leads us to the different types of opinions that the Supreme Court can issue to the public. There are 3 kinds that we want to talk about. The first of those is what is called the majority opinion. The majority opinion presents the view of the majority of justices to the world, for the world to hear. This is what I'm talking about just a moment ago when I was saying that at the conference, after having a vote and figuring out who won or lost a case, somebody then needs to be assigned to write an opinion for the world explaining why the outcome happened. That is what we call the majority opinion. The majority opinion is legally binding. If the Supreme Court in the majority opinion says these kind of laws are unconstitutional, those kind of laws will not be allowed again after that. It's the senior-most justice in the majority that then assigns one of the justices in that same majority to write the majority opinion. Now, I had to use the word majority a lot there in that sentence. So let's think this through. When they take a vote, one side or the other is going to be in the majority. There's 9 justices in the Supreme Court. Typically, it's an odd number. So when they vote, one side or the other is going to have more than the other one does. That's the majority then. Now, that majority has to write an opinion to be published to the world explaining why who they wanted to win is going to win, to give the reasons for the decision they're making. So it's got to be someone from that group in the majority who's then picked to write the opinion. Well, who does the picking? It's the senior-most justice in the majority. In other words, the person who's been on the court the longest, who happens to be in the majority for that case. Now, as a basic rule of the court, they assume that the Chief Justice is always the senior-most justice, even though, as we learned in a previous lesson, that's often not true. It's certainly not true right now of the current Supreme Court. So if the Chief Justice is in the majority, he gets to pick who writes the opinion. If he's not in the majority, then the person who's been on the court longest who's in the majority will be the one that picks. Now, I know that sounds really kind of complicated. The basic idea is somebody has to be picked to write the opinion. That person is going to come from the majority, and whoever's the oldest, or in other words, been on the court the longest in that majority, is the one who's going to do the picking. One of the ways that they might pick in a particularly contentious case that was just barely decided with 5 votes on one side and 4 on the other is to pick the swing justice to write the opinion. Now, why would you pick the swing justice? Well, remember, if this is a close case where it ended up 5-4, the person who's probably sitting in the middle is the swing justice. If you then pick somebody way off on the extreme to write the opinion, they might end up writing something the swing justice doesn't like. And the swing justice then could switch sides. Then the other side would become the majority, and they'd have to sort out amongst themselves who's going to write the opinion. Not only could that kind of thing happen, it does happen with the Supreme Court. After the conference, as they start writing the opinions and circulating them around to each other, one or more of the justices could change their mind, and it could change who the majority is. So a potential way to try to avoid that is when picking the person to write the opinion in a particularly contentious and divided case, is to pick the swing justice. That way that person can write something that they're comfortable with and stay with the majority on that case. When the majority opinion or any other opinion of the court is written, the first draft of it is then usually circulated around for the other justices to look at, to make comments about. This then is what gives them the opportunity to potentially to switch sides once they see what the majority is actually writing. Usually that first draft, or at least often, if not usually, is written by one of the Supreme Court's clerks. So after the conference and they've decided who would win or lose, and somebody's picked to write the opinion for that given case, then that justice will go back to his or her chambers, their offices in the Supreme Court building, sit down with their clerks and say, okay, I got assigned to write the opinion in the Jones versus Smith case. And Smith was the winner, and here's why we thought Smith should win. Okay, now, clerk number 1 over there, I want you to go write a draft of an opinion expressing those views that I just told you. So again, this is another opportunity for the clerks to have influence on the justices. Yes, they'll take the assignment that the justice gave them and try to fulfill it, but they'll put their own spin, their own bias into it. They may even try to pull the justice along a direction that they want to go. And the justice can potentially let them get away with it, with the clerk's views showing up in the opinion. That is one of the many ways that the clerks that were mentioned in a previous lesson can have influence over the outcomes of the Supreme Court. Now, there's 2 other kinds of opinions we want to talk about besides the majority opinion. Now, the majority is the most important one because I said a few moments ago it's the legally binding one. But there are 2 other types, and the first of those 2 other types we're going to talk about is a concurring opinion. A concurring opinion presents the view of a justice, or perhaps even more than one justice, who agree with the outcome the majority is getting, but this justice has a different reason for that outcome. In other words, they think that the majority's got the right winner, but for the wrong reasons. And so they're going to write their own opinion giving the right reasons. These concurring opinions are not legally binding. It's only the majority opinion that's legally binding. So if they're not legally binding, in other words, they have no real legal effect right now, why even write a concurring opinion? The truth is that the people who write these are writing for the future. They're concerned that perhaps this issue could come back to the court at a later time. And if it does, that maybe the court, when they see it again, they could end up deciding that the majority opinion was really lousy the first time around, and that could cause them to go over to the other side. So what the concurring opinion is trying to do is trying to give a reason for future courts to still have the same outcome in future similar cases by, in their mind, giving a better reason for that outcome. In addition to majority and concurring opinions, there are also what we call dissenting opinions. A dissenting opinion expresses the view of a justice or multiple justices who disagree with what the majority is doing. They think the majority is getting it wrong. And so they write their opinion, which again is not legally binding. The only legally binding opinion is the majority opinion. They write their opinion again for the future. They're hoping that somewhere down the road, an issue similar to this will come back to the Supreme Court. And when they look back for a precedent, they'll look back at this case. And after reading the dissenting opinion, they'll realize the majority got it wrong. And in that future case, they'll correct it. And they'll do what the dissenter or dissenters in this case wanted to have happen. So concurring opinions and dissenting opinions are written for the future. Majority opinions are written to be legally enforceable right now. Now, let's review what we learned in this lesson. What type of an opinion is legally binding? Is it a plurality opinion, a majority opinion, a concurring opinion, or a dissenting opinion? The legally binding opinion is the majority opinion, where the Supreme Court has laid down a clear rule with a majority of them behind it for people to follow. Who decides who writes a majority opinion? Is it the senior member of the court? Senior member of the majority? Is it always the Chief Justice who decides? Or is it always the Chief Justice who actually writes the opinion? It's the senior member of the majority who decides who will write the opinion of the court. What opinion agrees with the outcome of a case, but for a different reason? Is it a plurality opinion, a majority opinion, a concurring opinion, or a dissenting opinion? That is a concurring opinion. What opinion disagrees with the outcome that the majority came up with? Is it a plurality opinion, a majority opinion, a concurring opinion, or a dissenting opinion? The opinion that disagrees with what the court is doing is called a dissenting opinion. All right, that finishes this lesson. The next lesson will also be from Unit 7. It'll be Lesson 12 about judicial power.